Welcome to the Resilient Recruiter Podcast. This is your host, Mark Whitby, and I am thrilled to be joined today by Amanda Brandenberg. Amanda is the founding principal at OpusLex Partners, a legal recruiting boutique servicing law firms and corporate legal departments throughout the country. For over a decade, she was a top producer at two of the country's largest legal staffing firms. Then, in 2018, Amanda founded OpusLex Partners to bring a hands-on, customized, and personalized approach back to legal recruiting. And that formula is certainly working for her. In just 3 years, she successfully built a $2 million firm. Amanda's passionate about her work, obviously, and enjoys the challenges and the competitive nature of the recruitment business. When she's not sourcing top legal talent for her clients, you can find her spending time with her husband and 3 children and 2 rescue dogs at home in Atlanta. Amanda, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mark. Excited to be here.
All right. So I always like to hear people's origin story. How and why did you get into recruitment?
Well, probably like most other people in recruitment, it was a happy accident and maybe a long and winding road. But when I think back on it, I've really always been in some sort of agency environment. So the summer before I graduated from college, I went out to Los Angeles and worked for a talent and literary agency, placing, I should say, assisting in placing writers, producers, and actors in the entertainment industry in Hollywood, and really loved that environment. I thought it was absolutely thrilling, very exciting. And that was what I wanted to do. So I returned to Los Angeles after college, worked for another talent and literary agency for several years there, still loved it. But what I realized there was that a lot of the agents around me were splitting their deals with entertainment lawyers. And I studied English and philosophy in college. So law school had always been in the back of my mind. And it just felt like the practical next step if I did want to continue as an agent. So I came back to Atlanta to apply to law school. And during that time, my mother wisely suggested that I spend some time in a law firm, making sure that was something I wanted to devote several years and many thousands of dollars to. So I did, and really did not like being in a law firm, or I should say, really that sort of linear day to day that was required for that level of work. I found it very intellectually stimulating, but didn't really suit my personality. So I ended up deferring to law school for several years, and finally decided that that was not going to be a path I would pursue. And while I was preparing to return to Los Angeles and back to an agency environment, I met my now husband, which sort of created some complications in returning. And in the interim, someone suggested I should consider sales. So I took a job in luxury retail. And then I had also had this experience working in law firms by that point for several years. And then finally, one day answered an ad with Robert Half seeking someone with sales and legal experience. And that's how I got started.
Perfect. It was the intersection of so many different experiences. And wow, I forgot that you did philosophy as well. I have a philosophy degree as well.
That does
It's
not
funny,
surprise me.
there's a few of us in recruiting who have weirdly got a philosophy degree, but that was super smart of your mom to say before you enroll in law school, because how many lawyers do you know? I know plenty or graduates of law school who are not practicing lawyers because they only figured out, after doing that it wasn't going to be for them. So you kind of, I think, made the right choice there. What happened next? So you joined Robert Half, and how did you progress from there?
Yeah. So I joined Robert Half really with the, understanding with myself and my then boyfriend that I was probably going to do this for maybe a year. At that point, I had a ton of credit card debt from living on my own in Los Angeles in a very low paying job. And I really had to kind of work my way through that. So I thought, okay, maybe I can do this and see how this goes. I knew nothing about staffing or recruiting whatsoever, but maybe I can pay off some of this debt and I'll figure out the next step. So, it's interesting, and something that I think about a lot when I am now hiring for my own organization is I remember when I went into that interview, they really had a lot of questions about being money motivated. And I think that's something we talk about a lot in this industry. And it wasn't, ironically, even though that was sort of my motivation, it wasn't anything that really resonated with me as being compelling. And I think part of that was
Mhm.
because I really didn't have any money. So it was hard to really be motivated by money when you don't have any. Um, but I was highly competitive in the sense that I wanted to win. And that didn't really mean necessarily working against my peers or even necessarily getting accolades from the organization in terms of any sort of external validation. But when I was hired there, I was doing mostly temporary staffing for generally legal support candidates. So, paralegals, legal secretaries, receptionists, and this is 2006, 2007. So, at that point in time, we were not yet in any sort of mobile environment, right? We were working in the office with manila folders and paper, and we were still faxing some resumes at that point as well. So, if someone called you on a Friday afternoon and said, our, person just quit and we need someone here on Monday, you were really tasked with coming through for that person who was responsible to their law firm partners or whomever it may be. And that was really what drove me was sort of being that hero in that story and being a good service partner and just wanting to win in that regard and fill the order, especially if they gave it to multiple people. I found that to be exhilarating and very exciting. And as a result, I ended up doing very well. And then I was sort of paying a little bit more attention to the money because it was really helping me pay off my debt. And I just absolutely fell in love with the business. So that was,
Oh, awesome.
yeah.
That's a great story. So, where you mentioned this, like just wanting to win and that actually being more satisfying to you than the money. And money is great, but it was more winning and delivering an excellent service that was kind of like your driver. Like, what do you think are the qualities or attributes or values that are necessary in order to achieve the level of performance that you have in your career, Amanda? Like, the winning maybe is part of it. What else is there to it?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this lately with our core values here at Opus Lex Partners and really how I can trace all of that back to the beginning of my career. And when I think about it, really partnering with someone and taking ownership and taking responsibility for whatever that assignment may be. And it's the same if you're working with a candidate and they have tasked you with finding them a new position or negotiating the best offer for them and putting yourself aside and really evaluating the task at hand. And it comes back to integrity and transparency. And I think empathy as well, and having a genuine concern for the person on the other end of that side or the person with whom you are partnered. So I took a great sense of responsibility with those jobs and really felt that those clients were counting on me to fill whatever roles those were. Um, and took it very seriously. So I think for anyone starting out, you have to find your own motivator. And I think, especially with this younger generation that we have right now, they are really motivated by helping people. And, we are in a business, so you do have to dollarize that in some way and dig a little deeper because this can be quite transactional at times. But I think you have to really think about what motivates you. And if it's changing lives, then think about, how many placements that is per year in terms of how many lives change. I know at Robert Half, we had a very large banner that hung from the ceiling in the bullpen. And it just said, "Where's your next start?" And we were always in the contract staffing business, at least, we're always like, where's our next start? Where are we placing the next person? So rather than looking at it from a strict billing perspective, you really started with the person who you are impacting. And, in that scenario, you're impacting clients and you're impacting candidates. So if you're just really looking at the task at hand, everything else will fall into place.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And so, I mean, you went on to join Beacon Hill. You were a top five producer there. In fact, in 2016, you were the number one company wide. How many people were in that business?
So when I left, Beacon Hill was roughly a $500 million company. So there were several hundred probably at that point in 2016.
Okay. Wow. So number one out of several hundred, and you've already shared some of the kind of the mindset that helped you to achieve that. Were there any other factors, like if you think about your own performance and like what was the 20% that made the biggest difference to your success there, do you think?
Absolutely. Um, a lot of that success stemmed from a few major clients. And I think that's where it goes right back to what I was just talking about in terms of having that level of personal responsibility and the commitment to your client and doing whatever it takes to show up for them and deliver the service that they're expecting. We had a very close relationship with one client in particular. We traveled with them, we set up projects with them, we would procure real estate, we were managing the supplies. I mean, top to bottom, start to finish, we really provided those solutions. And I think, again, keeping that in mind and doing really whatever it takes to get that job done, which, may include crawling under a 6-foot table that you just set up at 11 p.m. and making sure that the desktop monitor towers or the towers to the computers are taped to the legs so that they don't get kicked over. um, you know, extending your
Wow, that's
trip
attention.
to, for 3 weeks after you thought you'd be coming home 3 weeks prior. Getting the donuts for 400 contract attorneys at 6 a.m. when you went to bed at 2 a.m. So there was a lot of that that was really sort of grassroots stuff that we did. And I think the other key part of that was I really developed an amazing team there in those years that was extremely loyal to me, and I was extremely loyal to them. And we all had really the same goal in mind, and we worked extremely well together.
Amazing. So, okay, so the two real keys that I took from that are number one is really going over and above to um, forge those client relationships that those accounts can grow and develop, and you grow with them, and the amount of commitment, ownership, responsibility you took in order to ensure that they receive that level of care shines through there. And then the second was, having the right team around you as well. Um, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So you alluded to a project where you had hundreds of attorneys. Like, what can you give me a sense of, like, what sort of key clients were these, and how did you really, apart from the things you just shared, like going on trips and staying away from home and working till 2 in the morning, like what was that was the peripheral stuff, but what was the core that you were delivering for these clients?
Absolutely. So we were delivering a scalable resource for a particular piece of litigation, which is, you know, this story, I suppose, starts probably 10 or 12 years ago at this point. But when this was a relatively new concept, it was much less of a commodity than it is now. So there were a lot of kinks to work through. But these are mostly contract attorneys reviewing documents for relevance and privilege within the course of discovery in the course of litigation.
Ah, okay, got it, got it. And how long do these projects like go on for?
Some of them may go on for, as little as maybe 2 or 3 months. Others can go on
Mhm.
for years, literally.
Wow, okay. So you were very successful at developing these relationships was what else do you think, because I'm looking at this, Amanda, thinking, I'm sure there was lots of folks at that company who cared about their clients and worked super hard. So I'm just wondering what else separates that top performer from an average performer. I was not in the top five. I was in the top 15% at my firm out of 200 recruiters. I was pretty proud of that though, because I started out in the middle of the pack and worked my way up to the top 15%. But you were at the, echelon above that. And I'm really curious to know like what it takes to achieve that.
Well, Mark, first, I'm glad that you're on the other side of this now because we really need you here as a coach. Um, I think a big part of it is, first of all, being self-aware and recognizing that you're not a fit for everyone. However, really finding those clients and contacts where you are a fit and really capitalizing on those relationships and strengthening and deepening those relationships. So for me, I think a lot of people take the approach that they're just going through their call sheet and they're approaching every account or every client the same without really the emotional intelligence or appreciating the nuances of who they are clicking with and really who they're tracking with at an exceptional level, and then really following that path. So I think that's one thing. But two, just not settling. And eventually, when I was number two for a number of years in the company, I really, really wanted to be number one. And we made it happen. So, there's a lot of that you can't control. But for most people, probably that internal drive does kick in. You're like, I've just got to check the box and really scratch that itch. And I think that is probably something that most top producers have, is sort of an internal itch that can never really be scratched. And this work is never done. And there's always more and more to achieve.
Absolutely. Tell me about the team aspect though to it, because you credit having a great team around you as being part of the secret to your success. So, what is involved in putting together an awesome team that enables that success?
Again, self-awareness. First of all, I have a very long list of things that I am not good at that are not my strengths. I really do understand what my
That
strengths
surprises
are.
me, Amanda.
No, absolutely. I am not the most organized person. I've got a lot of loose ends at any given point, and sometimes I kind of can't be bothered with the details. But if when the power goes out in your review room because you didn't have enough voltage going for however many monitors that you have set up in there, and the client has their client there, and you're in a bit of a crisis and the client is breathing down your neck, I am really good in that situation. I can manage that. But a lot of the other things are not my strengths. So for us, again, I was always client facing. I was, very good with that and really enjoy that, and looking at really the big picture of the project, understanding the financials, understanding the value that we were providing to the client as well as to our candidates. And really sort of that deliverable was my strength. But there are lots of other people that were so necessary with those projects, with, of course, recruiting and the day-to-day of that. A lot of the, internal housekeeping that comes with having that many people on the same project, um, and operations was huge. So
Totally.
there were plenty.
So could you like just break that down? Like when you were top five in this firm, what was the structure of your team and what did other people do for you?
Yeah. So in that scenario, I was client facing. So meaning this particular client and piece of business that we're talking about was something that I developed personally. So 15 years ago at this point almost. So that was my client. All the communication went through me, all of the complaints, crises, pat on the backs, all of that stuff went through me. I had two people doing recruiting, sort of at different levels, I would say. I had one person more senior than the other, and they would sort of project manage each other, which was really helpful. And then one of them was typically more responsible for boots on the ground, day to day, any sort of feedback we needed to give contract attorneys and managing those details that went along with housing a project like that all across the country, which we have multiple locations over the years where we were doing these things.
Amazing. So it was just a team of three?
That was, yes.
Wow,
And
that's amazing.
yeah,
Lean and mean.
it was very lean and mean. We did scale it, of course, as the years went by, and we would use different teams and different markets within our organization. But we were really the core three people who
Okay.
were responsible for that.
So you were the business developer and client facing person, and you were supported by two recruiters, basically.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So, what would you say was let's just keep going with the chronology. So you were doing super well there. You had a steady, lucrative role. You were getting lots of accolades. I saw a video on YouTube of you winning awards at a big company conference and stuff. Why did you decide to leave that and start your own gig?
Well, I think I felt that, in every sense of the phrase, it had really run its course. For me personally, I reported to a national managing director who reported to the CEO, and I had been there almost a decade. And the opportunities for me for the next decade were really opening more offices and really being a dedicated middle manager did not speak to me. So there was that piece. I also, could feel, and we were getting very real-time feedback from the marketplace and our clients, that what we had devoted so much time and energy to was becoming much more of a commodity, and the margins were deteriorating and the expectations were accelerating. And I was also getting older, it turned out. So, as I was starting to approach 40, I thought, with, three children, the last large project I did where I was crawling around at 11 p.m. taping towers to tables, I was 8 months pregnant. I thought,
Oh,
I
wow.
don't think this bodes well for me in the next decade of my life, and I need to figure something out. So, I really wanted, a new challenge for a lot of reasons. One of the greatest joys I have from my previous firm, I opened the office for them in 2009 during the recession and built out the Southeast for them. And of course, developed that client as well. And what I learned about myself is that I really enjoy building. And once something is sort of set and running, that's great, and that's the goal of the company, right? Is for things to have structure and processes and a team and profit and revenue and all of those things. And I felt like we had done it, and I needed something more at that point. So, for a lot of reasons, I decided to go out on my own, which ironically was something I swore I would never do. But here we are.
Amazing. I obviously missed a step in the story here because I forgot that you building Opus Lex, you had already built an office for your previous firm. So could you talk a little bit about that? Because the timing of that coinciding with the recession, that must have been pretty tough. What did that, how did you pull that off?
Well, the advice I would give anyone who's approached with that opportunity is to really seriously consider it. It was something that I was approached about multiple times and rolled my eyes. I was done with staffing. I wanted out of the business. I never wanted to place another temporary candidate for the rest of my life. And we were in a recession. So I was asked to, open an office with a Northeastern based brand name in the South in a recession in a time where no one needed another staffing firm. That was the last thing anyone needed. And by the way, I was newly pregnant and had just bought my first house. So
That's a perfect storm.
it was. So none of that seemed like a good idea, but it ended up being truly, one of the most pivotal opportunities of my life. And I'm so glad I said yes. And I'm so glad I did it. It started with me at my house, my new then house, and working in my guest room and, taking one order and filling it and just repeat, repeat, repeat. And then I had someone who I had met at a trade show a year ago approach me and say, "Hey, I see you've moved over here. I'd love to join you." She came on board. She was still there when I left. So, and then we grew, and then we were in temporary office space, and then we got a little, a bigger room. And when I say rooms, I'm being very literal here. I remember we had a room for years with no windows that I called the Vegas
Oh
room because you never knew what time it was. It was absolutely terrible. So we went through sort of a lot of startup pains, and and then it was 9 years later. I mean, it was built and it was thriving. So I really felt that I had accomplished a lot. The people I had brought on had accomplished a lot. We had grown up tremendously together. And it was time to move on and imagine something different for myself and for the market.
Amazing. And so what was the sort of size and shape of the business when you were done?
So when I was done, I mean, the company itself was about 500 million when I left. When I started, it was 50 million. And that's for the company, not just the legal division. So I should be specific about that. Um, so I think when I left,
But your office, I'm thinking like you built it up and you grew the team. What how what did that entail, Amanda?
yeah, I think we had maybe when I left 5 or 6 people in
Great.
Atlanta. I had also opened a Nashville office at the time that was new because we had been doing a lot of work in Nashville for a number of years out of Atlanta and felt like we really needed a local presence there. We'd also been doing
Mhm.
work in the Carolinas, out of Atlanta, and some in Florida. So we were very mobile at that point, and the lines got a bit blurry as to who was assigned where, I suppose. But we had beautiful office space in Midtown Atlanta, and we had a review center. So you know, it had come from nothing to something that I was very proud of when I left.
Awesome. That must have really given you a confidence boost then to, think, "Hey, I can do this you know, and do it for myself this time."
Absolutely, it did. And yes, and I will say that I am still amazed every day at how much I don't know about what I'm doing now and how much I'm learning.
Do you know what? I'm turning 49 in a few months, and I remember being younger, like in my 20s, thinking that, like looking at people a decade or two older and assuming that they must have everything figured out and know what this is all about. You know, and now I still don't know, like I'm still figuring this whole thing out. But
Absolutely.
yeah, we're always learning. So you started in 2018 and you built that up over 3 years. Talk to me about that part of your journey, which is the most recent, and I would say the most relevant, like for our audience, because we have a lot of business owners listening in, and I'm really excited to learn the trials and tribulations of Opus Lex.
Sure. So I started in October of 2018 by myself, and I went through these calculations numerous times with my family because I am the primary breadwinner at my house. And this is a really big deal to leave a very stable, long term spot where I was very comfortable and very safe for going out on my own. But I really felt like there was no other option that I saw. And it was something that I eventually became very excited about when I thought about it. So, as we've talked about, my background historically was in contract staffing. And that's something that, for anyone who doesn't know about contract staffing or is interested in that business, I'd be happy to talk to you because I think it's not as glamorous or as sexy necessarily as the bigger perm deals. And it's definitely a different style of recruiting and a different type of relationship. But if you are an agency owner, it is so valuable from a business perspective and for providing a lot of stability to your financials. So I would definitely recommend it. And it really solves a huge problem in the marketplace at times. So
Absolutely.
I knew that was something that I wanted to have. So I went to a lot of different resources and went through painstaking trial and errors to set up that infrastructure from day one because I knew that would sort of bring a lot of stability and continuity to my business and our revenues. So that was one of the first things we did was set up our contract staffing arm. And after that, it was me on my own. And thankfully, so many of my clients, if not all of them, really came right along and rallied around me and wanted to support me. So we were off to the races from day one. I knew that I was leaving a lot of that large volume stuff that we've been talking about the last few minutes behind, and that was by design. So I was very excited to really, pare down my business and really think about who are the people I really enjoy working with, and also thinking about how my own organic network has matured and taking stock of that and really leveraging that and the types of deals I wanted to work on and the type of people I wanted to talk to every day.
Amazing. I'd love to talk more about contract staffing in a second. Um, what are the sorts of deals that you're doing now? Like, what sort of roles are you filling, and what services are you offering
Sure.
at Opus Lex?
Absolutely. So, the majority of services that we're offering right now in this market, which I think is a big underscore, we are placing law firm partners. We are placing associate general counsel for in house corporate legal departments, and we are placing lateral associates with law firms by and large.
Great. Okay, fantastic. And that market is just seems to have gone crazy in even during COVID, it was growing, and now it's showing no sign of slowing down. Um, so there's the whole candidate shortage piece, which we could talk about if we have time. But what I'm actually really curious about is how you've married up the contract staffing and the, permanent and executive recruiting, because, and I love that you've done that. A lot of, and actually that's not uncommon here in the UK. But what I see in America is these two worlds seem to be very separate. And for whatever reason, like, now they are different things, different services, and require, a different setup. But to me, they just seem like very natural, like they're brother and sister, really.
Hmm.
Why wouldn't you offer both? Because they both have their own advantages. So the contract staffing gives you that recurring revenue, the stability and continuity of income,
Hmm.
which is a, peace of mind as much as anything, but also gives you the confidence to grow and to hire because you know what your billings are going to be next month and the month after. But then the, permanent or direct hire, as you call it, placements give you that, injection of much bigger, fees, which is amazing. And it seems obvious to me that you would, like, I don't see why you wouldn't want to do both. But um, I guess the only downside I can see is maybe the split focus. And does it dilute, because they are different? Is it challenging to manage both because they're sort of different modes of working?
Yeah. So I think the reason a lot of people don't have both is one, it's expensive and time consuming to set up and support the contract side, right? There's a lot of infrastructure that's required there, with timesheets. Liability insurance is incredibly expensive. Of course, you have to have workers' comp, and you have to, if you're going to be competitive in the marketplace, especially with any, type of high end staffing like we're in within the attorney space, you have to make sure that you're offering exceptional benefits to your candidates, which a lot of people don't want to be bothered with. So I think, if you're somebody like myself 3 years ago who was alone, um, solo, and you're working out of your house, you're probably not going to have a contract staffing business. You're probably going to be, just doing perm deals, which there's nothing wrong with that at all. So I think that part was very unusual, but I never set out to be a solo recruiter. And frankly, I didn't have a lot of training on the perm side. So I was very comfortable with contract staffing. It was something that made me feel very secure from a financial perspective. And I had those relationships. So I think that's one reason people don't do it. But I don't, I also think they don't understand it. They don't understand how to price it. They don't
Mm-hmm.
understand the margins.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, they don't understand how expensive it is per hour, like what their payroll burden is, so that they price it incorrectly and then they're not making any money and they feel like it's a hassle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other piece of that is really choosing your contract staffing. So with our staff, anything we do contract, it's really only going to be substantive attorney work. So nothing like what I did when I was a, kid at Robert Half, placing one day receptionist. I mean, that's a nightmare. So,
Oh,
especially if you're a
totally. Yeah.
small team. So we really
Right.
only do high end sort of sophisticated stuff where people are grown-ups and get to work, and we don't really need to manage it too much. So that is one piece. But yes, to your question, I do think it's a different type of consulting from the agency's perspective. It's very different, and that it's client focused, right, versus so much candidate focused. And typically a client is not going to give a contract need to a handful of recruiters on a contingency basis. So especially with the larger projects like the client we've been talking about here that I had for so many years, um, you know, there were probably people all over the country who wanted that business. So it's highly competitive in terms of business development. Um, but I think, the other part of that is having both of them is so smart, because when I started at Robert Half in 2007, it was right before the recession. And now, having gone through and come out of that recession, COVID, this insane hiring boom that we're in now, you have to be able to respond to the market. So being exclusively locked down to contract when you have a very low unemployment rate is a hard gig to have, because you don't have a lot of unemployed candidates to place. So that is very challenging. Being locked into only doing perm when you're in a recession is a really bad place to be as well. So having the ability to pivot and respond to the marketplace has been hugely impactful for me these past 15 years.
Amazing. I love that. It's so true that, that cyclical nature of, and unpredictability, you're sort of you're building this into your business that you will be resilient no matter what happens. So that's fantastic. Talk to me about the difference between being a top biller and actually building a business. Was there anything that surprised you when you started your own business that, you maybe weren't expecting? Or like what was that like?
So many things have surprised me, starting my own business, but the biggest is that I think it's overwhelming what a blank canvas you have. Every day that overwhelms me in terms of your marketing, your branding, how you hire, what's your comp plan, how is it structured? Do you have temp producers? Do you have perm producers? Is everybody doing both? And um, if you're like me and you're a perfectionist and really type A, you kind of want it all done right now. And that can drive you crazy to be on that progressive, slow, um, figure it out as you go plan, which I think a lot of small businesses probably are. So for me, the number one thing that has been most surprising and most difficult is the sheer amount of decisions that I need to make and things that I need to think about.
Absolutely. Can you think of an example?
Um,
You mentioned to me on a previous occasion, like you feel like you're wearing 42 different hats. Um, and when you work for a company, most of the you still might have two or three hats, but a lot of those are done by other people, right? And now you do everything in your business.
right.
So,
So
yeah.
I'm thinking about my week right now. It's hiring. Well, what does that look like? How are we structuring that? Are we hiring experienced recruiters? Are we hiring junior recruiters? Well, do we have a training program for them? What's their career progression going to be? What's their comp plan going to look like? And now, are they working in the office? Are they working at home? What does that mean? How are we going to be intentional about a remote culture if they're not here? That's enough for anyone to think about for 2 years straight, I think.
Right.
Um, uh, you know, okay, marketing, what does that look like? What's your tone of voice? What's your brand? How are you showing up in the marketplace? These are, all these um bigger ideas that I think we're all faced with as business owners, down to, hi, maybe we should get a coffee service here in the office and little things like that. But at the same time, if you're also the top biller in your firm, you've got to do the work. And that's a lot to manage, is simultaneously
Hmm.
thinking about how you're showing up for your employees, how you're managing, how you're developing them and supporting them as best you can. And, all these other things that are keeping the business on track for growth so that you are achieving your goals every year and you are working towards your end goal, whatever that may be. But also, these clients and candidates have needs every day. And it's hard to do all of that when you're just starting out and you're a small firm and you might not yet be at the place that you would love to be at right away.
Absolutely. Well, you've just highlighted exactly why a lot of solo operators do not scale because there's so many moving parts and it's hugely challenging. And I'm excited that you're up for that challenge and you're tackling it head on. Um, what have you learned then in the 3 years? So you've gotten to 2 million, which is a phenomenal milestone, and you've built, the beginnings of a team. What have you learned looking back? Would have been the biggest learnings from that?
Well, I think when I started, I really had one goal, which was not to go into foreclosure on my house and not to bankrupt my family. I really, I had an idea about how my firm would be different. And I think the approach that I would bring as an individual. And then it was jump. Um, is there revenue? Are we profitable? And I think for the first couple of years, I was a practitioner who was
Mhm.
really just sort of continuing her career on her own with, some help from some other folks at that time. But I really had not sat down and thought about, you know, a lot of things that I think are now essential to our organization, especially to grow. So, and unfortunately, the timing of COVID had a lot to do with that too,
Yeah.
since that was sort of right after, really after we were celebrating our 1 year anniversary, COVID hit. So I think that was a year that we kind of missed out on in terms of traditional growth because we were really just trying to stay afloat during that time. So I'm kind of working backwards and forwards at the same time right now.
Absolutely. Amazing. And so, like, thinking about because you are still a producer and are delivering to clients, how do you allocate your time? Like if you think of the percentages, like how much goes to doing the fee earning, how much goes to like managing the team and working with them, how much goes to the marketing and operations stuff, like if you were to break it down.
I think right now, a lot of my time is going to the business in terms of management and making those strategic decisions. I mean, probably as much as 60% of it. So I absolutely am looking to grow our team in the way of recruiters because the business is dictating that I show up for the business to continue on this path that we're on right now. And we need to continue our revenue growth. So that's a huge pull. And I would say right now it's, maybe 60% on the business, 40% recruiting. It probably needs to even out a bit. So it's 50-50. I recently hired a chief operating officer. And it was someone I know and trust from other areas of my life who, as a business owner herself in her own right, who has some extra time and bandwidth right now. And at first I was a little worried that, oh, maybe I'm not going to have enough work for her. I've been
No
laughing
way.
because I've given her a full-time job. She is, working around the clock, and it was actually just such validation for me because I had been, really hard on myself that I was not achieving a lot of the things I wanted to achieve for the business, or not able to make decisions as quickly or create a program for X, Y, or Z as quickly as I wanted to, while I was also still being the primary fee earner. And then now that I have her and she's, working over 40 hours a week to execute a lot of these ideas, it's been very validating and also hugely impactful. So I'm really glad,
Amazing.
yeah, for that.
Congratulations. That's so cool.
Thank you.
And that's interesting because I've adopted the same strategy for growing my business, Amanda. So, as you know, I've got Leanne, who's my right hand person, and she's the COO. And, just what a smart move that was to bring her on board. So, I'm glad you found someone like that who I think you and I have quite a lot in common. You mentioned you're not the most organized, and like you've got the big picture and the ownership of the clients and that sort of thing. But then some of the little details slip through the cracks. So um, totally can relate to that. You said something interesting, which is that you were hard on yourself and feeling that like you were not um, achieving everything you had wanted to. And I find this is actually a common thing with high achievers is because you mentioned ownership and responsibility and the fact that you take ownership and you feel responsible for making things happen. And that is a hugely positive quality. The downside of that, though, is I've noticed that that type of person also can be quite hard on themselves and beat themselves up if they don't manage to live up to their own expectations in that regard. Do
Sure.
you ever feel like that's a factor?
Absolutely. But I think, with anything else, I mean, I made this decision to start this company and I knew that I did not want to be a solo practitioner. And back to those ideas of integrity and transparency and personal ownership, if I am asking other recruiters, potential employees, clients, candidates to come along on this journey with me and be a part of my organization or partner with our organization, then I owe it to them to deliver a first class experience for them and to have all of my ducks in a row and T's crossed and I's dotted. So it is, they probably give me, frankly, a lot more grace than I give myself. And it is important, I think, every day, every week to realize, to look back and see how far you've come from where you started, but also recognize that this is a process and you can't judge, your the reality of your today with somebody else's today, which may be, many years beyond yours, or maybe they had some investors when they started, or you can't compare and you can't judge.
I agree 100%. And that is a really nice way to finish up this conversation is um, what, like 5 years from now, what will Opus Lex look like?
I imagine that Opus Lex will hopefully have recruiters in most major cities. We're not bound by geography now. We are very fluid in that way. But I know many recruiters are very excited to really be the authority in their own market. So I would love to have some folks from around the country to join us and expand the brand there, while also continuing that um, very bespoke, personalized service that we really aim to deliver, and choosing the clients we want to work with and the candidates that we want to represent. So we are well on our way to um, becoming a $10 million company. And I think we will absolutely be there by that point. We will always be woman owned, we will always be diversity focused. And I'm really excited to see what the future has to hold for us.
I love it. Thank you so much, Amanda. I really enjoyed this conversation and appreciate you for sharing your story and your wisdom.
Thank you so much, Mark. It was nice chatting with you.
Thanks again.